call the special board meeting to order. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Mrs. Grassi.
Here.
Mrs. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Bullier.
Here.
Mrs. Harrington.
Here.
Ms. Keynes.
She's here.
You said here.
Mr. Lynch.
Here.
Mr. Pappas.
Here.
Mr. Downs.
Here.
Mr. Kamiri.
Present.
Ms. Ellis.
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Quorum.
All right. Second item is public comment. Mr. Pappas, if you could one more time.
We should all have to commit this to memory.
Record this. Just for a couple times, and then it'll be fine. You just gotta do it.
Publicly communicating false statements about people that defame them could subject the speaker to both criminal and civil liability in the state of New Hampshire. In that vein, statements made at public input or at public hearings are not immune from potential consequences for their words. Furthermore, the fact that the public body does not prevent these statements from being made does not excuse or endorse those statements. It just means that the public body, in this case the school board, both recognizes and respects the right to free speech enshrined in the First Amendment to our Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. Next item on the agenda is review of structural engineer recommendation.
All right, before Mr. Chuddy starts, I just want to thank the board members that are here tonight. Thank you for being here and responding to my email. Unfortunately, that went out the other day. It's unfortunate news to share tonight, but I want Mr. Chuddy to share all of the information that we've gleaned thus far so that you can make a decision. So thank you for being here tonight. Mr. Chuddy.
Thank you, sir. Board members, you'll recall last month I spoke to you about some structural concerns at William Allen Elementary School, and I was going to bring in FullBoard8 and Roberts Associates to look at that, and they did. So our 1963 built William Allen Elementary School, the report is quite lengthy. It concludes that since the original construction, the southwest corner of the foundation of the grounds and equipment room has settled and displaced to the south. At this time, we have found no conditions at the south end of the building that suggest loss of structural integrity of the framing, resulting in unstable conditions, and the building is safe for full occupancy, William Allen School. So this is the area we're talking about. It's a crack, and I was on the phone with masons tonight. Now that we have the report, we're going to get out here and try to stabilize this a little bit so that there's no chance of anything spalling or falling off, and we'll get that situation taken care of. Certainly no showstoppers here. Unfortunately, that's all the good news I have for you tonight. With all of the rain in July, it caused me to have some extra walkthroughs at Nancy Loud School. Now, it will come as no surprise to anyone. I know that the 5-year committee toured the school recently and saw some pretty rough conditions. The amount of rain that we had, I believe it's accelerated the conditions. And when I was touring the school, I could no longer say with good conscience that I feel okay about this building. I want to bring in a structural engineer. So we had FullBoard8 and Roberts, local at William Allen. We brought them out to Nancy Loud to look at the school. So the school was constructed in 1880. Just let that sink in for a second. 1880. That school was probably built by Civil War veterans. So we knew about a water infiltration issue. We knew about some deterioration in the foundation. We all know that this school is slated for closure in 2025. So again, what I just spoke about rainfall in July, made me want to bring in engineers, and that's what we did. So the FullBoard8 Roberts report states, since the time of original construction, the brick and stone foundations along the southeast wall have deteriorated, resulting in lateral displacement of the foundation wall. The outward displacement of the southeast exterior wood framed wall above the foundation has resulted in a leaning exterior wall which is not restrained at the bottom and may become unstable due to additional movement or further loading. This wall supports a portion of the second floor and roof above, and these areas are unsafe for full occupancy. With the caveat, prior to shoring of the building or making any repairs, the school personnel could be allowed limited access for a brief period of time to remove equipment or supplies from the building. So what they're saying is that we're not saying imminent collapse. We're not going to caution tape off the area. We don't think it's coming down today or tomorrow. What they're saying is we know it's going to close in 2025, but they're not comfortable saying do nothing, you're okay till 2025. If we want to load that school back with students, there's some work that needs to be done. We can access it to get stuff in and out, but a full load of students and teachers without doing anything is not recommended by the structural engineer. So this is a picture of the back wall of the building, and what all those words in the report mean is this wall is kicked out this way, and this foundation is kicked out this way. That's the lateral movement that we're talking about. I think this is a little bit of a better picture. You can see kind of an arrow right across here, right? This bottom foundation is moving out. The wood above is also moving out, all hinging on this line right here. Especially if you look at, assuming this is plumb line, and we're not sure anything is plumb out there, but if your eye grabs that as a plumb line, you can definitely see movement in that area. Inside, where the walls are moving, this is an interior wall connection. It's a partition wall. It's connected to this is the foundation wall that's moving out. And you can see some large gaps as the parting wall is not moving as well. This is one of the most troublesome things to look at. This is a load-bearing floor joist that at one time was pocketed into a sill over here. And that sill has moved away, and this notch has slid out of the pocket. So you've got about 2.5 inches right there where there's no longer any bearing in that. So that floor member is what we call cantilevered. It's supported from further back and kind of just hanging out there by itself. Additionally to having FullBoard8 and Associates there, the structural engineer, we brought in S.W. Cole, the geotechnical engineer, because we're talking about soil and movement. We want to have their opinion as well. So they talk about the separation of foundation and floor joists along the southeast perimeter wall and depression in the central portion of the building indicates soil movement and settlement below existing foundations. Toward the central portion of the building, we observed a depression below an existing firewall. The extents of the depression appear to be encroaching toward existing load-bearing columns. Let me show you a picture of that. So this is not a load-bearing wall, this is a partition wall. But the floor has sunk. And all of these bricks are going down as well. Again, this wall is not load-bearing, but in the floor of this picture, you can see a column. The depression is maybe 12 foot around, and at each corner of that, there's a load-bearing column here, there's a load-bearing column here, and on the other side of that parting wall, there are 2 others. And that depression has appeared right between all 4 of those load-bearing columns. If the depression grows, those load-bearing columns are going to be undermined, and they will no longer be load-bearing. So we took advantage of having FullBoard8 there and said, well, give us some idea of what a fix might look like. And this is a drawing of what a fix might look like. This is a cross-section of the foundation that's moved in the back. This is the joists that are no longer pocketed that I showed you a picture of. And what we would do is we would dig and put some footings in here inside the building. We would dig and put some footings outside the building. And then we'd weave needle beams, they call them, in through the foundation to pick up. So any of the weight coming down here, instead of having to go through this foundation, would now transfer around either way. It would also give some lateral support to the project. We've been working with Harvey Construction on the construction of our new school, and Harvey did great. And we called and we said, hey, need you to come out here, look at this. They dropped everything. They ran to help us out with this, just like they did when we had a problem at Gonick School. So it was great to have that support from them. They looked it over, they called in their team, and they come up with a very rough, not based on a lot, based on a bag of a napkin sketch that has not been evaluated yet. They come up with a price of $282,925. So let's back up for a second. I want to show you, let's go back to, okay, we're going, $282,000 addresses this problem, this problem, this problem. Doesn't begin to talk about this problem. This problem, as W. Cole's recommendation, is before we can even begin to talk about what we need to do here, we need to do about $13,000 worth of investigatory work through more geotechnical borings to find out exactly what the soil conditions are underneath. So roughly $282,000 to fix many of the structural problems, another $13,000 to figure out what the rest of the structural problems are, plus X. We don't know what they'll come back with once we find out what is underneath this floor and what work needs to be done then. So 282 plus 13 plus X, we're still left with a building that is far less than perfect. The outside of the building is known to have some problems with the paint. It's peeling off. Remind everybody that's pre-1978 paint. The building was built in 1880. So we're starting to see some extremely accelerated failure of the paint. And we knew it had been failing. We tried to put money in the budget for siding and paint, I think as far back as 2019. The failure, especially with all the rain, that failure has accelerated. So that pre-1978 paint from an 1880 building is coming off faster than it ever has before. So if you were to spend all the money that we've talked about fixing foundations, you've still got this problem. This problem was valued at, I think, $475,000 in 2019. It's probably twice that today. So with all that in mind, my recommendation, talk this over with the superintendent, and he supports this recommendation. As your director of facilities, I can't ask for anything other than the permanent closure of Nancy Loud Elementary School, effective immediately.
Is that it, Mr. Dodd?
That is it, sir.
Great. Ms. Keeney?
Yeah, who's going to determine what the depression is being caused by? Is Cole doing that?
We have to pay them to do it.
We would have to pay them, so
Well, doesn't that sound like that's something we ought to do? I mean, we're not gonna get rid of this building. We might move out of it, children out of it, but we're not gonna get rid of it. So we ought to really know what we're dealing with.
So I'm not sure if that's accurate, because the reality is we're moving out, and we move the kids out now, and it becomes
would
the
be the
city.
city. And that
It
building-
becomes the city's property.
Well, okay.
So I could take an educated guess at what's causing the depression. It's all the water that's infiltrating through the foundation. We removed an underground oil storage tank from that building about 10 years ago, and I recall vividly watching that process. And it was a 580E case extender hole. They were digging a hole, just like digging on the beach. You dig in sand, the hole doesn't want to go down, it wants to go out. The sides keep falling in, it gets wider and wider and wider. As we tried to excavate to remove an underground storage tank, that hole became twice as wide as it was deep because the sand just kept falling in. Water is running in through the foundation. It's exiting right about where that depression is, and as the water leaves, it's carrying sand away with it.
Ms. Harrington?
This question is for Kyle. Kyle, do we have room for the number of students in Nancy Loud for another elementary school to absorb those numbers and staff?
Preliminarily, we're looking at, yes, we can, absolutely. Staff as well.
Hold on. Don?
How many children are in that school?
So currently 88.
Audrey?
All the staff would still have their jobs,
Yes. Yep.
just be reassigned. My opinion, I think we have to do it. I've always been a huge supporter of Nancy Loud. You know, I've always wanted it to stay open. I think it's got so much character, but safety of our kids has to be priority.
Mr. Pappas?
I would agree. I have one question. With the staff being moved, that's going to displace other staff. I assume that we're going to be doing some shuffling here, there, everywhere to accommodate.
Not necessarily. I mean, we still need to hire people. So if a school was, let's say, absent a kindergarten teacher, we just gained a kindergarten teacher and no one was displaced, right? So we're not fully staffed right now, which is a good thing. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure no one is impacted and everyone can remain as whole as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Down?
How many staff members are at Nancy Loud?
So it's K to 4, and then there's paras and interventionists and UA people. So it changes daily just based on the UA schedules, but you know, you've got a custodian, a lunch person, About 15 each day are there, but it's a different 15 depending on the day.
And they don't have an assistant principal, they just have, and how many principal opens do we have in the school, in the district right now?
One.
Mr. Kamari?
Transportation issues, are we gonna have to, the bus route's gonna be able to absorb?
Yeah, Ms. Perkins is here, but we actually have a bus company meeting next week, so we believe we'll be able to safely transport.
So most of those kids were walkers or
Yep.
neighborhood school?
Mr. Bollier?
I'm just gonna make a motion that we permanently close of Nancy Loud Elementary School effective immediately with the administration making plans to relocate staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Mr. Downs?
How would we relocate the students, like, what schools they go to?
So we would look at class sizes. We look at class sizes. One thing that I've already started to work with administrators a little bit on the class sizes that we currently have in the other schools. Tonight, if your motion passes, I'll be issuing a press release that will go out tonight. I'll be contacting staff at Nancy Loud, meeting with them tomorrow to talk about some plans, and I would also recommend that we hold a public forum on the 10th before our school board meeting from 5 to 7, so Nancy Loud families can come, staff members can come if they want, because by the 10th, I'll have a definitive plan on where everyone will be and how they'll get there and all of those things.
Now, how long have you known that there's a possibility we're gonna close this?
Well, like as Mr. Toddy said, I mean, I think it's due to all the rain. I mean, we knew, the state of New Hampshire placed us #1 in the building A list. And as Mr. Toddy said, it's kind of a dubious distinction because if you're #1, that actually means your facilities are the worst. So an 1880 building, we were hoping it was gonna limp across the finish line and get us to the new school. Unfortunately, with all the rain, you know, it's just unfortunate the timing, but I also think it is fortunate with timing because school hasn't started. We have no one in those buildings right now. Everyone's safe. We can safely accommodate folks where they will be safe in schools. So timing actually is to our benefit.
When we reviewed it in the space study, Shane, they said that the school had a lot more life left in it. We did some structural stuff to it over a tenure to try to get it to be to the point where we got to a new school. And so there was no fourth.
No, I get it, it's just,
It's staying,
I know it's in rough shape, but Tuesday I got an email and meeting today, so it's kind of a late notice. I think the board should have been aware of it a little sooner than that. That's just my opinion.
Okay, Mr. Bollier?
When did we get the final engineering report?
So the day I sent your letter was the day that Mr. Toddy was contacted. So we brought the people out as Mr. Toddy saw the issue. I notified you once I had verified the issue.
Okay. Ms. Ellis?
The equipment in there will be moved out too, and you can still use some of it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, we'll salvage everything we can.
Okay.
Ms. Grassi?
And I think the 5-year committee had toured that building sometime in the fall.
Yes,
And I've just been holding my breath since then. I was in that basement, and even then I knew, oh my God, any day we could hear that this can't be occupied anymore. So I think some of us did know that we were walking a thin line with this school, just praying that it would get us to the new school.
Right. Ms. Keynes?
Thank you. I'm a preservationist, I guess, is what you'd say. And so I'm kind of curious. Your experts that you had come in and look at this and make this testing or citing or whatever they did, have historical backgrounds to them? I mean, Portsmouth is standing and it's all over 100 years old, so.
Foleyview and Roberts are structural engineers. A historic preservation, the structural isn't gonna change. How you disperse the load over a beam and make it secure, it doesn't matter if that beam was set in 1880 or 1980 or 2080, gravity's gravity's gravity. The structure of the building isn't gonna vary greatly, whether or not it's reliable. So they didn't look at it.
I disagree with you a little bit, but that's okay.
All right, well, let me try to finish answering your question. They did not look at it from a historical perspective, they looked at it from a safety perspective. Safety is the #1 concern. So a structural engineer and a geotechnical engineer, the guys that look at the ground underneath the foundation, neither one of those is gonna look at it with an eye of a historical aspect. What they're looking at, a wall that they don't feel safe bearing load anymore.
I get it. I
So-
saw the pictures.
So the idea is, once we realize that, right, I believe it's incumbent on us to get the kids out of there, you know, not put kids back in that building, figure that piece out, and then at some point, if somebody wants to look at that building from a architectural point of view and decide this is an 1880 building and it's worth saving, at that point, somebody may want to put all kinds of dollars into it to do that.
They
Right
put
now-
foundations and carrying timbers and all that in all those old,
Sure,
100-year-old buildings.
But right now,
the
the school level, we've talked about, we're gonna pull out of that school in 2025. So if, from a school perspective, to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into fixing a foundation for a school that we're gonna occupy for only 2 more years, that's the question that you would need to evaluate. Because after 2025, we give the building back to the city. It reverts to city property. Once the school is done with it, we hand it back over to the city.
Who's the company that did the inspection?
Foley, Buell, Roberts and Associates are structural engineers that, they're structural engineers that evaluated when we had fire retardant truss problems. They're the structural engineers that evaluated that. They're the structural engineers that worked on the East Rochester project as well as the Tech Center project. They're kind of our partner, our go-to structural engineer. They're also part of the new school project. The geotechnical was S.W. Cole, who's another licensed professional engineering firm that specializes in underground.
Mr. Boyer.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think the key thing that the board has to remember is, this is not blame, this is a reality. We knew this, our goal was to build it out of school, and every year, budget got cut. And this is the building that, this is the result of our cuts. It's a reality. I think we have a good motion on the table, time to move on.
Mr. Pappas.
Mr. Toddy, thank you very much for all the work you've been putting into this building all over the years. I mean, watching things, you've made us aware of many of the problems, or at least those of us on the 5-year committee and building committee over the years. So thank you very much for all the work you've done, and especially in the last week or two. You know, as a history teacher myself, I'm very much into preservation, and when we do hand this over to the city council or the city to take possession of it, it's in their hands. If they want to spend the money on that to fix it up, they can spend the money on that. We don't have the money to you know, $300,000 just to get it to operational specs right now. That's just not in our budget to do, and we have to support this motion. We have no choice.
I think that you're right on the right tracks, Mr. Pappas. You're not even accounting for the $475,000 in lead paint issues we might have or whatever we've got going on, and we've got to be cautious of that. With all the rain we had in July, this is just a result being expedited into a system, and I'm with you 100%. Thank God we have a watchful eye like Dave Toddy, who checks the buildings, walks the buildings, has a communication with the staff to make him aware of problems. If he wasn't paying attention to this, imagine how poorly this could have gone. It shouldn't even be a conversation at this point. So I'm going to let everyone make their finishing comments, and then we're going to call for a roll call vote, okay? So one more time around the table. Mr. Downs?
No, I agree with Mr. Pappas. Even if we did put the money into the building, I still wouldn't feel safe sending students into that building. I think it's time, unfortunately, but it's time.
Mr. Camille?
So once we vacate the school, get our people, the kids out of there, what is the turnaround to revert that back to the city? Or are we gonna incur minimal, at least minimal cost through
No, Mr. Tony
timeframe?
contacted the building inspector and the fire department, so we'll work with the city to hand it over once we've vacated it. Probably, we'll get all the essential things out before school starts and then slowly pick away at the remainder of things. Probably early fall, October-ish, I think was the timeframe that we may be able to send to the city.
That would be my hope, because there's consideration about, do we have to heat the building?
That's
Because winter's coming. So
shutting the water off or whatever the.
So the other problem is that there's a wet sprinkler system in the building, so
Right.
if we shut it down completely, it won't have fire suppression, and I don't think the fire department will be too happy with that, so it would need to probably get raised or heated. The other piece of it, the fire department repeater for their radio contact, and the entire eastern half of Rochester runs through that building. So I've already talked to Deputy Chief Hughes about that repeater to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, because if that building goes away, that repeater can't. So that will have to get addressed pretty early in the process.
Kyle, have we communicated all this information to the city manager?
I did speak with them, yes.
Thank you. As long as the city's aware that we're heading this way, there should be no concern. So any other questions or comments before we go to the roll call vote? Ms. Grassi?
I do feel sorry that we're having an old building that has historical significance to a lot of families. I've had people talk to me about the new school in relations to Nancy Loud, closing Nancy Loud, and they really feel terrible that we're closing it. They went there, their family all went there, they know teachers that were there. And so I do have a great deal of sympathy for that emotional connection to the school, and it would be nice if the city could preserve it in some fashion. I mean, they could start a fund drive to put all kinds of money into it. But I have 2 grandchildren who attend there. I would just as soon not have them attend there.
Yeah. Agree with you. Okay, seeing no additional comments, roll call, please.
Mrs. Grassi,
Yes means,
yes means close.
Sorry, yes
yes
vote.
means we go away. Yes.
Sandy,
May I ask
roll
what the motion exactly is?
It's right there.
I can repeat it.
Permanently closure of the Nancy Loud Elementary School effective immediately.
And
Okay,
administration
does that have anything to do
handle
with
relocation.
moving your children around or anything like that?
We've already
Because I
talked
think that's the problem you're gonna run into at the city council.
We're aware.
But-
That was part of the motion.
Okay, that's,
Just want to make sure that it's clarified, the motion is that administration will handle the relocation of staff and students.
Right, and he's gonna present it on the 10th, right, Kyle? So he's gonna have that data for us on the 10th.
Mrs. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Bullier,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
Ms. Keenes,
no,
Mr. Lynch,
Yes?
Mr. Pappas,
Yes.
Mr. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. Kamari,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, that's it.
That's a good question.
You can?
How soon are you gonna send a message out, Mr. Pusey, to families and parents and,
Tonight, so after we finish this meeting.
okay, thank you.
And he said he would meet with the staff tomorrow, correct?
Those that are available, so I know the administration are gonna be reaching out, but my message to them tonight will be, even if you miss the meeting, you can call me, you can stop by, you can email, anytime.
Anything under other? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is adjournment. Is there a
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed.